Ryan, can we talk? The words came from Emily, but they were different this time. There was a tension in her voice that I couldn't ignore. It had been building for a while now, this silent shift between us. We'd been married for almost 6 years, and for most of that time, I had been attentive, always trying to make her feel loved, cared for, and wanted. We had our ups and downs, but nothing that felt like this. I glanced up from my sketches, noticing the way she was avoiding my eyes. She always did that when something was wrong. "Of course," I said, setting my pencil down on the table. "What's on your mind?" Emily sighed, running her fingers through her hair as she sat down on the edge of the sofa, looking a bit uncomfortable. "I don't know. I've been feeling a little off lately." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what she meant. We'd been in a comfortable routine. I'd always made sure to be there for her, whether it was helping with things around the house or planning little surprises, just to remind her how much she meant to me. But lately, she seemed distracted, and despite all the attention I gave her, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. "Off how?" I asked, trying to keep the concern out of my voice. "It's hard to explain," she said, her voice low. "I love you, Ryan. I do. But I need something more. I feel like I'm stuck in this routine. It's like we're going through the motions, and everything's fine, but I need more than just fine." She paused, as though trying to find the words. "I need something that excites me again. Something real." The words hit me like a cold wave. I knew she'd been feeling restless for a while, but this, the way she put it like it was something beyond just a phase, left a pit in my stomach. I'd always made her feel like she was the most important person in my world. I thought I was doing everything right. But now, her words cut deeper than I expected. "What do you mean by more?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Emily hesitated. "I don't know. It's hard to explain. I just want to feel alive again, like there's excitement, passion. Like there's more to life than this." I could feel the sting in my chest. "More than us?" I asked carefully, trying not to let the hurt show in my voice. Her eyes shifted, avoiding mine again. "It's not that I don't love you, Ryan. I do. It's just, I want more than what we have right now. I want to feel something different." There was a strange sadness in her voice, and my mind began to race, but I didn't know what to say. What was this more she needed? Was it something I was failing to give her? I had no answers, only a growing sense of dread that something was slipping away from me, and I didn't know how to stop it. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "Emily, we can work through this. Whatever it is, we can talk about it. We've always been able to talk, right?" She nodded, but there was no conviction in her eyes. "I don't know, Ryan. Maybe I'm just tired. Tired of the same old thing," she said, her voice quieter now, as though she was second-guessing her words. I felt a wave of confusion and frustration building inside me. If she was tired, what had changed? She had always said she appreciated how I put effort into our relationship. Yet now, she was telling me she wanted something different, something that I wasn't sure how to provide. "I can change," I said, not fully understanding what I was promising. "We can try something new. We can go away for a weekend. Maybe, or I don't know if that's enough," she interrupted, her voice growing more uncertain. "I think I need more than just a change of scenery, Ryan." And there was the heart of it. She didn't just want change. She wanted something else. But what? And who was giving it to her? A few days had passed since Emily's confession. I was doing my best to keep things normal, but something wasn't sitting right. I'd been noticing her subtle changes. The way she'd seemed distant even when we were together, how she would go out more often, and how the conversations between us felt more forced. One evening, as she was getting ready to go out for drinks with some friends, I noticed her phone lying on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but that night, the urge to check it gnawed at me. I knew I shouldn't. After all, I'd always trusted her, and we'd never had secrets. But the way she had spoken earlier, about feeling trapped, about needing more, had stayed with me. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but a voice inside told me to look. I unlocked her phone and immediately saw the Tinder app. My stomach dropped. I had always known Emily was a bit restless, but I never imagined she'd turn to something like this. The screen opened to a profile that didn't look like hers. Not really. There were pictures of her, of course, but they were taken in different lighting, angles she'd never used before. I felt a strange lump in my throat. She had been hiding this from me. I scrolled through her conversations, my hand shaking slightly. My eyes locked on one message, an exchange with a man named Alex. It wasn't the first time I'd heard his name. Emily had mentioned him a few times in passing. He worked in marketing, she'd said, and they sometimes met for coffee to brainstorm ideas. But what I saw in these texts was something far more intimate. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I think about you all day," Alex had written. Emily's reply was quick, almost eager. "I've been thinking about you too. I'm excited to see you again." I felt the color drain from my face. My wife, the woman I thought I knew so well, was clearly involved with someone else. And not just any someone else, but a man who was making her feel wanted in a way that I hadn't been able to for some time. I couldn't breathe as I continued to scroll. The messages were flirtatious, full of longing, and incredibly personal. She was confiding in him. She was sharing things with him that she should have been sharing with me. "Alex, I'm ready for tonight. I need something more than just us." It stung. I knew what that meant. She had found something outside of our marriage. Something that had replaced whatever we once had. Something more exciting, more thrilling. My hands were clammy as I set the phone back down. I couldn't believe what I had just read. My mind raced. Was this just an affair of the mind? Or was she seeing him physically? And if there was more than one, how far had she gone? But I had no answers. Just more questions. I had to understand. I couldn't confront her yet. Not without knowing more. I was angry. Hurt. But more than that, I was confused. How had I missed this? That night, as Emily left for her girls' night, I couldn't sit still. I needed to understand what was happening, how deep her need for excitement went. And that's when I made a decision that I never thought I would. I created a fake Tinder account. I knew it wasn't the right thing to do. I knew it was a violation of trust. But I needed answers. Answers I couldn't get any other way. I set up the profile with a fake name, Jack. I chose a picture of a man who looked nothing like me, tall, older, maybe a bit more mysterious. I didn't care about looking like anyone she knew. I just needed to get her to talk. I didn't want to confront her yet. Not without knowing how far this had gone. How many men were there? How serious had it gotten? Once the profile was set, I messaged her. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment. What should I say? Something casual. Something that would grab her attention, but not make it too obvious. I typed, "Hey, I see you've been looking for someone to have some fun with. I might be the guy who can give you what you're looking for." I hit send, and I waited. The messages between Jack and Emily continued to flow, each one more convincing than the last. I had a goal now, and I wasn't going to back down. I needed to know what was going on, and this was the only way to find out. Over the next week, Emily's responses became more flirtatious, her tone lighter, more open. She began telling Jack things she hadn't shared with me in years. How she felt trapped in a routine, how she longed for adventure, and how she couldn't deny the thrill of meeting someone new. Her words confirmed everything I had feared. I had been right. She was looking for something outside of our marriage, something I couldn't give her anymore. I had almost convinced myself it was just innocent flirting until she proposed meeting up. Maybe it's time we finally met. I need someone who understands what I'm missing. Do you? I couldn't believe what I was reading. My wife was seeking more from someone else, and now she was actively pursuing it. I wasn't sure whether to be furious or heartbroken, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let her know it was me. Not yet. I needed to see this through. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the darker part of this story, the other man, Michael. I had seen his name pop up before, his text coming across as a bit more possessive, even demanding. Emily had told me a few things about him, too. He was someone she met soon after Alex. I didn't know much about him, but I could tell from her messages that their relationship had become intense. It seemed that Michael wasn't just seeking affection. He was becoming obsessed. His tone shifted from sweet and caring to possessive and controlling. One evening, I saw a message from him that made my blood run cold. "If you don't answer me soon, I'm coming over." I wondered how much Emily had even realized the extent of Michael's possessiveness. She had brushed off his behavior when I asked her about him. "He's just passionate," she'd said, almost defending him. But it wasn't just passion, it was control. And in her search for excitement, she had gotten herself tangled up with someone unstable. I began to feel an uneasy sense of urgency. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous this felt. Michael's messages grew more erratic, and he began threatening to tell me about the affair if Emily didn't meet his demands. One night, Emily received a message from him. "You're mine, Emily. Don't forget that. If you're not with me, I'll make sure he knows everything." At this point, I could see how Emily was trapped between the two worlds, her need for excitement and the dangerous grip Michael was tightening on her. I felt for her, in a way. She was just trying to find a spark, something to fill the void, but she had wandered too far into dangerous territory. Still, she didn't see it. She kept telling herself that Michael was different, that he cared about her. But the longer I watched from the sidelines, the more I saw that she was slowly losing control over the situation. I couldn't keep waiting any longer. I had to act. I kept the conversations going with Emily, playing the part of Jack, the mysterious man who could offer her everything she craved. She was responding to me as if I were her escape. She seemed so eager, even desperate. I could sense that for all the excitement she was chasing, there was something she wasn't saying, something that made her feel cornered, unsure. The truth was, she was on the verge of something she couldn't undo. She just didn't know it yet. Finally, Emily agreed to meet. Her message to Jack confirmed it. "I'm ready. I think it's time we meet in person. Let's see if the spark we have here is real." I knew that once I met her, I had to act swiftly. I had to confront her, but I also had to be careful. If I pushed too hard, too fast, she might shut down. But if I didn't confront her now, I feared this would spiral further out of control. I felt an overwhelming sense of finality as the meeting approached. Everything would change once we faced each other in person. She thought she was meeting a stranger, someone who could offer her the excitement she craved. But she had no idea that the man sitting across from her would be me. The cafe was quiet when I arrived. I had been there early, pacing in the corner, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions inside me. I needed to be calm, calmer than I had ever been before. I had to keep my cool. I couldn't let her see the hurt or the anger. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. Then, I saw her, Emily, walking through the door, scanning the room as if searching for someone. Her eyes locked onto me, and for a brief moment, I could see the confusion in them. She hadn't expected Jack to be standing right there, her husband, the man she had chosen to betray. Her eyes widened slightly as she approached the table. I could see the hesitation in her steps, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Her lips parted as if she was about to speak, but she stopped herself. It was as if she was trying to make sense of what was happening. I didn't give her time to process. I pushed the divorce papers across the table, their crisp edges sliding slowly in front of her. "This is it, Emily," I said, my voice steady, even though the weight of everything was crushing me. "I've been here the whole time, right here beside you. But you chose to look elsewhere." Her face flushed a deep red, her eyes flicking nervously between me and the papers. It was like watching a door slowly close in her mind, the reality of what was happening sinking in. I could see her trying to find an excuse, trying to talk her way out of it. "You don't understand," she began, her voice faltering. I didn't mean to, but I didn't let her finish. I was done listening to excuses. I had seen enough. The betrayal was too deep, and no words could undo what had already happened. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened. From behind, there was a sudden commotion. Footsteps too heavy, too hurried. Before either of us could react, Michael stormed into the cafe, his face twisted with rage. I had seen him in the messages, but this was something else entirely. He wasn't the calm, charming man she had described. He was a stranger now, someone driven by jealousy, obsession, and anger. He had followed her. He knew this was where she was meeting Jack, and now he had arrived. Michael's eyes locked onto me immediately, and without warning, he lunged toward me, grabbing a nearby chair and swinging it violently in my direction. Emily gasped, her hands reaching out as if to stop him, but it was too late. Time seemed to slow as Michael closed the distance between us, swinging the chair with full force. My reflexes kicked in, years of martial arts training coming to the forefront. I sidestepped the blow with ease, grabbing his arm mid-swing. In one swift motion, I twisted it, forcing Michael to drop the chair as I pulled him into a controlled lock. He struggled, his body thrashing against my grip, but he was no match for me. He wasn't trained, and he was driven by panic, not logic. "You need to stop," I said, my voice low but firm. "This ends now." Michael's eyes were wild with rage, but there was nothing he could do. His body was immobilized, and any attempt to fight back only made him more desperate. He was no longer the man Emily had been seeing. Now he was a threat, a dangerous, unstable force. Emily stood frozen, her face pale as she watched the scene unfold. I could see the shock in her eyes, the realization of how far things had gone. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was a life-threatening situation. Within moments, the cafe staff had called the police. Michael, now defeated and panting, didn't resist when they arrived. The officers quickly took control, cuffing him and guiding him out of the cafe. His eyes met mine one last time, filled with a mix of rage and confusion. As the police led him away, I stood up, my hand still trembling slightly. Emily had not moved, her eyes wide and unfocused. She was in shock, caught between the horror of the situation and the guilt that was surely now consuming her. The damage was done. She had betrayed me, and in doing so, she had invited chaos into our lives. Michael was arrested for assault, his mental state clearly unstable. Emily didn't say anything, didn't move. She just stood there, her eyes locked on the spot where Michael had been taken away. For a moment, I couldn't speak either. What was there left to say? This wasn't about love anymore. It was about survival. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more thing I had to do. I turned to Emily, who was still in shock. "You need to make a choice, Emily," I said softly, more to myself than to her. "You need to figure out what this all means. And you need to understand how much you've lost." The silence between us stretched on, suffocating the air around us. Emily stood there, frozen, her eyes wide, staring at the door where the police had taken Michael. I could see the confusion in her eyes, a mixture of disbelief and guilt, as if she still couldn't fully grasp the gravity of what had just happened. The man she had been seeing, the one she thought was an escape, had turned violent. And I was standing there, her husband, bearing the full weight of everything she had done. I felt a cold rush of anger and hurt deep in my chest, but I held it together. The anger would come later once the shock wore off. For now, I had to stay in control. I sat down, pulling the divorce papers closer. I wasn't sure what kind of reaction I expected from Emily, but I didn't get it. She didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't try to explain herself. Instead, she looked at me with a kind of broken resignation, her lips trembling as if she was searching for words that couldn't come. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. I don't know what to say, Ryan." Her voice was barely above a whisper, almost as if she feared saying the wrong thing would somehow make the situation worse. "I've been so lost, and I thought I needed something more, something different." I didn't interrupt her. I didn't know what to say either. I had spent months questioning why things had changed. Why my wife, the woman I loved with everything in me, had decided to step outside of our marriage. The trust we had built, the life we had shared, it all seemed like it had been shattered in a matter of months. All because she was searching for something that I could never have given her. Or maybe I hadn't known what she needed. "I never meant for it to get this far," she continued, her voice breaking. "But Michael, I didn't see how much he was changing. At first, it was thrilling. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was important. But then it got out of control. And now," she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I didn't need her to finish it. I could hear the unspoken part. "And now, I've ruined everything." I leaned back in my chair, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "You need to make a choice, Emily," I said quietly, my tone much softer now, but still firm. "You can't keep running from the truth. You can't keep running from the mistakes you've made. I've given you everything I could. I've been loyal to you. But you chose this. You chose him over me. And now, you need to decide what you want." Emily's face twisted with pain, and I saw the tears starting to well in her eyes. She was a stranger to me in that moment. The woman sitting in front of me was not the same one I had married. I couldn't even recognize her anymore. She didn't speak for a long time, and I could see the battle playing out in her mind. She had been seeking excitement, passion, a sense of fulfillment she felt was missing from our marriage. And now it had all come crashing down. She had wanted more, but what had she gotten in return? A controlling, unstable man who had nearly killed me in a fit of jealousy and a wrecked marriage. Finally, Emily looked up at me, her voice barely audible. "What do you want me to do?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air. There was no easy answer, no magical solution. But there was one thing I could offer her. "You have two options, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "You can sign these divorce papers, walk away, and leave everything behind. Or you can choose to stay. But if you stay, we start over. No more lies, no more secrets. You'll have to rebuild trust, and that's something I'm not sure I can give you again. But I'm willing to try if you are." I slid the divorce papers toward her, waiting for her to make her decision. For a long time, Emily just stared at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. I could see the inner turmoil, the guilt, the weight of everything she had done pressing down on her. She had lost so much. She had lost me. She had lost the life we had built together. She started, but her voice faltered, and she stopped herself. I could see her trying to gather her thoughts, trying to put the pieces together. But there was no easy way to fix this. There was no way to undo what had happened. The question wasn't about going back. It was about moving forward. "I don't want to lose you, Ryan," she finally said, her voice full of regret. "But I don't know if I can fix this." I didn't say anything at first. There was nothing I could say. She was right. It was going to take more than words to fix this. It was going to take time, trust, and an entirely new foundation. But I had to be realistic. No matter what she decided, this had changed everything. There was no going back to what we had. The trust had been broken, and no amount of time would undo that. The morning after the events at the cafe, everything felt different. The air was heavy, as if the world had changed overnight, and there was no going back. Emily had left the house early, her suitcase packed, and her eyes full of the same uncertainty I had seen the night before. She hadn't made a definitive choice then, but I could see it in her eyes now. She was finally confronting the reality of what she had done. I wasn't sure what the right choice was for either of us. I was numb, tired of trying to figure out what went wrong, tired of wondering where the woman I had married had gone. But I knew one thing. I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. I had tried to save what we had, tried to offer her the space to choose, but now I had to let go. When Emily left, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad, at least not in the way I expected. There was relief, yes, but it was mixed with sorrow. Sorrow for the love we had once shared, for the life we had once built. In the end, she had chosen to walk away, not because she wanted someone else, but because she understood her own shortcomings, the reasons behind her search for excitement. As for me, I wasn't sure what came next. I'd always prided myself on being a man who could build and create, but what was left now to build? A new life? A new beginning? I was still processing everything, but deep down, I knew I had to keep moving forward. I couldn't stay stuck in the past, and I couldn't hold on to someone who wasn't willing to fight for what we had. The months that followed were strange. Emily and I barely spoke after she left. She reached out a few times, but the conversations were awkward, distant. We were both too raw, too hurt to go back to any semblance of what we used to be. I couldn't look at her without remembering the betrayal. She couldn't look at me without feeling the weight of the decisions she had made. Emily began to focus on herself, taking time to sort through her own feelings. She wasn't just running from me anymore. She was running from the person she had become. It was painful to watch her go through that, but it was something she had to do on her own. I realized that, like her, I needed to focus on my own growth. I had to rebuild my life, my sense of self. I couldn't carry the weight of her mistakes forever. And though it hurt, I knew I had to let her go. As for Michael, his path was darker. The investigation into the attack revealed more about his troubled past. He was placed in a psychiatric facility, and I felt a strange sense of closure. He had been a destructive force in both our lives, but now he was out of the picture where he belonged. I had been left to pick up the pieces of my life. But as time passed, I found that the most difficult part was not the anger, or even the betrayal. It was the grief of losing not just my wife, but the version of myself I had been while married. It was as though my identity had been wrapped up in that relationship, and when it ended, I was forced to confront who I was without it. Emily, too, was changing. She reached out to me months later, not to reconcile, but to explain, to apologize, to tell me she had finally begun to understand why she had made the choices she did. She was working on herself, going to therapy, reflecting on her mistakes. There was no offer of reconciliation. There was no promise to come back. But there was something else, a deep awareness that the mistakes she had made were hers to own. She wasn't running from them anymore. "I've learned a lot about myself, Ryan," she told me over the phone. "I've learned that I've been avoiding real issues, hiding from my own unhappiness instead of facing it. I'm sorry for everything I did to you, and for everything I didn't do." Her voice had changed. It was softer, less defensive. I could hear the humility in her tone, the rawness that came from finally seeing the truth about herself. I didn't know if she'd ever fully understand what her actions had cost us, but I knew that she was on a path of self-discovery. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only way forward for both of us, away from each other. As for me, the road ahead was unclear. The grief lingered, but it was not the same. With every passing day, I began to realize that I was not the man I had been before. I was stronger, more self-aware, more cautious. I couldn't ignore the lessons I had learned through this. I couldn't unsee the way I had let her slip away, and I couldn't erase the betrayal. But what I could do was move forward one step at a time. I didn't know what my future held, but I knew that I had to trust in myself again, in my ability to build, whether it was a career, a future, or a sense of inner peace. And one day, I would find a relationship built not just on passion, but on honesty, trust, and respect.